cashier. Get the money like a cashier. Customer, clientele. I was broke, that was last year. Getting money like a cashier. Get the money like a cashier. Benjamin, nothing less. I was broke, that was last year. Don't change them. I never switched up. Been down since day one. Stay social. People change them. I never switched up.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Dope Black Thoughts Live. My name is Kevin.
Oh, go ahead, Mike Carter, a.k.a. the Paperboy. Good evening. And then we have guests.
Got the newest member of the team right there, Larry Thompson, man. Say what's up.
How's it going, beautiful human beings out there? I am Larry Thompson Sr. or Larry Thompson Sr. It's your choice.
Nice. And Juan Marcano, representative Ward 4 in the Aurora City Council. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me, y'all.
Representing Ward 4, Ward 4's finest.
That's right.
No, so thanks for joining us, because, I mean, you know, you've been supposed to come on for some months now. We've got a lot of updates you need to give us about the work you're doing. You know, we did a little chat before, and, you know, you're saying you want to talk about some affordable housing. So I wanted to give you some space to give us, you know, kind of an update as to what you're working on, what we can expect to see.
Yeah, for sure. So housing generally, but definitely affordable housing. So, you know, y'all, this has been a major issue in Aurora, and not just here, all over the country for going on over a decade now, really since the Great Recession. And I'm really excited to let y'all know that Councilman Murillo is actually running a resolution this coming Monday that basically it declares housing as a human right. And that is, I think it's a big deal because that sends a clear message to our community and to our staff just how serious that the Aurora City Council sees this housing crisis that we're all in, right? And I mean, y'all already know the cost of housing in the Denver Metro completely out of control. Like I'll tell you, like I was a homeowner. I bought my townhome in 2016. We ended up moving out of that in 2019 and selling it, and it appreciated over that short amount of time, like $65K in value. And that's obscene because people's incomes aren't rising anywhere near at that same rate. Mm-hmm. And now you flash forward a couple of years later, you've got the median home price in Aurora is creeping up on $450. That's what it was in Denver when we moved here in 2015. So you've got a serious affordability crunch right now. And this is something that the city is aware of. They put together a housing plan that we actually approved just a few months ago. But before then, they put together something called the Aurora Places Plan, which they update periodically every few years to kind of get a snapshot on who is Aurora, right? And one of the things that was shocking to me there is that basically half of the renters in Aurora are cost burdened, and half of that half are severely cost burdened. That means they spend over half of their income just to keep a roof over their head, right? So these are folks who aren't even like thinking of like even able to like realistically purchase a home. They are stuck in this renting cycle. And what we're seeing here now, well, not just now, but we've seen an uptick recently, but really starting with the recession that led to, you know, that had included the housing crisis during the Great Recession. We've had what used to be like working class, like affordable homes get gobbled up by private equity and, you know, big out-of-state money, basically. And you've got a scenario now in Aurora where if you want to go buy a house, you're not just competing against other like working class people who are looking to get into a home. You're competing against well-financed businesses that want to buy up housing that used to be affordable for people. And this is where you get into these bidding wars, right? Like where you're hearing, I'm sure y'all have heard about like houses going cash, like 50K over asking, waiving inspections and all that stuff. That's these companies that are doing that. Like I've heard some people, even some realtors are like, oh yeah, it's all these Californians. They want to move here because we have great weather. It's like, that's not actually what's going on here. It's gotten to the point where even the Wall Street Journal now is actually covering it a bit. And one of the I want to read you this. This is a quote from the article, is that you now have permanent capital competing with a young couple trying to buy a house. That is going to make U.S. housing permanently more expensive. And they actually are predicting that about 1 in 5 houses that is being sold nationwide right now is being gobbled up by firms like Invitation Homes, which operates here in Aurora. And I have anecdotal evidence from some folks I know that they actually have been buying up houses in bulk. So it's making it, yeah, like here in Aurora. So like, Meadowwood and all these like little areas that we live in here, a lot of the times, like 1 in 5, keep in mind, 1 in 5 of those houses that goes up for sale is getting bought up by these kinds of groups. And what they're doing is not just pricing people out. They're turning what's supposed to be owner-occupied housing into rentals. And like, if this keeps up, basically, we're going to end up creating a society where you rent your existence, right? Because you have no hope of getting into a home that you own. Because even if there are still some people who are able to actually like break through this deluge of capital and get into a home, it is raising these values permanently, which makes it not just harder for working people to get into housing, but for our elders to stay in their housing. Because as this gets more expensive, their property taxes go up, right?
Yes.
So these folks on fixed incomes cannot swing that. So this is how you fuel gentrification, right? Because you have our elders then have to get out of their homes because they can't keep up with them. They might go into foreclosure. Some of them may be able to get assistance, right? But you get these houses go out on the market, and then you get these, again, private equity firms coming up, gobbling up some of that property. Or if they can buy a block, well, there goes the neighborhood, quite literally, right? That's how you get these rezoning applications and redevelopment. So, I mean, that's kind of what we're experiencing. I mean, Denver's been dealing with this, especially East Denver, for decades now, and it's here in Aurora now, and that's kind of where we are at. So, circling back to Crystal's resolution, I think that this is a good first step to really show the severity of the issue and how council really appreciates what's going on and wants to do something about it. And, this cycles back into a lot of the conversations that Kevin, you and I have had like over the years talking about community land trusts, social housing. But honestly, I think part of what we need to do is actually think a little bigger and then go into actual regulation around who is gobbling up our housing stock. Because it's not regular people, it's capital just coming in here and trying to buy up our city, basically. So I said a lot there. So yeah, go ahead.
I want to address the kind of the conservative talking point against what you're saying, because like a lot of conservatives or maybe even more libertarian thinking people would say, hey, let the market decide, and this gentrification is growth. But when you're talking about gentrification, you're talking about the worst type of gentrification. Exactly. Like not just there's more development going on in my neighborhood and now my taxes went up a little bit because there's more jobs around me. No, we're talking about grandma can't live here anymore. Now, and being on the school board talking about multiple hundreds of families on the west side of our district can't afford to stay there anymore. So now we have students and families with students moving out. So our school district is losing funding, and we're trying to build new buildings and whatnot. There's really on the ground, repercussions to this type of gentrification that you're talking about. So, really, I'm really glad that we brought up Chris Murillo's name, because I mean, she needs to come on the show too. We got to talk about how we're going to team up. I'm going to take each one of you down one by one.
I'm sure she'd love to come on. But yeah, I mean, Absolutely. Like she represents the part of town that has been the most susceptible to this. Honestly, like that's the part of town that in 2018, council decided to use as a guinea pig and did a original Aurora rezoning where, they created some zoning to protect some of the existing neighborhoods, but they actually upzoned most of the ward. And it got really interesting because when this was all being discussed, I went on to the Arapahoe County GIS website, right, where you can actually look up property information and see who owns what. A lot of that property was already for rent, and a lot of it since has gone up, for sale basically, and has been bought up by some of these larger companies as well. So you're cooking up basically in the poorest, most diverse part of our city, the recipe to repeat what's happened in East Denver. And I'm not just talking about, because I think you raised an interesting point, Kevin. I'm not just talking about the building of shiny new things, because I think we all like shiny new things, right? It's when you do that and you don't give a damn about the people who are already there and the businesses who are already there. And that's the problem.
Yep.
So, and that's something, like I said, we're going to start seeing that citywide. Well, it's already happening literally right now. So, you know, I've got some attorneys and folks who are smarter than I am when it comes to what is and isn't permissible looking into this. And I'm hoping to be able to bring some more detailed proposals. But like I said, I think we need to make sure that, you know, our neighborhoods actually have people who are buying up, you know, these properties and actually living in them as opposed to using them as investments. Because basically, what, you know, the Californian money that's coming here is these big capital organizations and these real estate investment trusts. It's not like, you know, regular folks like you and me just trying to, you know, move somewhere else.
Right. And what does that money, you know, that's a good thing to ask about in that situation is like, what does that money goes, you know, with investors, right? And how much money stays within, you know, the city limits or the area in which it's buying out.
Yeah, I mean, it's, if you think about it, it's an extraction mechanism, right?
Exactly.
Because that money is going to these companies. They might not be based here, or they might have like a smaller like holding company that holds some of those properties. But these profits are ultimately going somewhere else. They're not staying here in Aurora. This isn't a benefit to any of the folks here.
Right.
So.
Isn't that's almost like a newer form? Well, not a newer form, I guess, a more remodeled form of gentrifying in a form of, you know, investing into a community, removing them, but also they throw apartments in there, right? You know what I mean? And try to make it seem as if they're trying to keep it intact, but all in all, who gets the mortgage, right? And then where does that money funnel to?
Yeah. And I mean, the construction of like just luxury, and air quotes are intentional there because really there's not that much that's luxurious about luxury apartments, aside from the price. Yeah, the construction of luxury apartments as opposed to like condominiums, that's a whole nother issue, right? And a lot of these same groups, like you mentioned, Kevin, they like to bring up, oh, well, construction defects. Well, construction defects, like when you hear people talk about that, what they're really asking for is they want to weaken consumer protections. Because if you buy a townhome and you've got faulty plumbing, or your floor's not put in right, and you know tile breaks, or you create a hole in someone else's unit, something like that, that's not your fault. That's the developer's fault. They might have cut some corners. They might have hired some, you know, unskilled labor to do this stuff, and you deserve, you know, to be made whole, right? Because that's your home that you bought. So always, you know, when you hear construction defects, major red flag there. The state legislature's already looked at this. You know, it's not a new issue, and you know, I'll defer to Representative Dominique Jackson on this because I've had conversations with her in the past about it, but they're pretty cool with where, or happy with where things are at. And basically this is just kind of like the scapegoat that we continuously hear from the development community about.
Hey, Mike, I was kind of wondering if, you know, in the legal aspect of it, not saying that you know, do a lot of stuff with, you know, permits and, you know, construction defects and stuff like that, but is arbitration one of those things that they're weaponizing against actual owners of these condominiums in newer developments? Because I know
HOAs, and
it's HOAs.
Sign on all. First of all, there's like multiple layers. There is the metro districts, which are a pseudo governmental agency that when you buy a house, you don't even know that you have now signed on and signed into this metro district. It is something that the developers have so much power that they then use that power to put pressure on the legislature to, like Mr. Marcano was saying, weaken the consumer protection, weaken things that, wait a minute, what do you mean my house is falling apart? I've been here a year. I think I should have a warranty for a year. That all goes into that consumer protection. And so what they want to do is they want to take your rights away from you and take it to arbitration. And instead of you going to some type of suing them in a state court, normally, that I'm sure when you probably didn't read it, but in your HOA, there's something that says at a certain point you go to arbitration. Now, I don't want to drop on arbitration. It is what it is. But it's arbitration that they pick, they control, and generally, you know, they don't pay for. I believe arbitration, both parties have to pay for, depending on the HOA. That being said, it's the weakening of that covered with the metro districts. These are metro districts that are put in place to, all right, your plumbing, roads, your streets. Aurora won't pay for that. And correct me if I'm wrong. Aurora does not pay for that. Aurora does not pay for infrastructure. So if you're moving out east towards Kansas, it's still Aurora. Aurora's not going to pay for that infrastructure. What the companies will do, they will form a metro district. And that metro district will issue a bond and pay for the roads, the streets, and all the infrastructure. When you move into that metro district, when you move out east, you have now agreed to pay all of that, and it comes out of your house note. It comes out of your. It's an extra tax that come out of your house note, your HOA. You don't even know that you moved into this metro district and now have become a part of it, and now are on the hook for all of this infrastructure. There's good and bad things about it. Understanding Aurora has had tremendous growth and has not had to pay for it. But there is, you know, the trust you're going to put into a developer. And I can tell you, we just.
Well, here's my question: is the oversight on the metro on their metro utility district?
Government organization. There is a. I don't want to call it a board, but it's a group that is made up of developers, developer cronies, and maybe if you're lucky, a homeowner. And that is the person who decides how this money is spent, how this money is paid out, how much goes back into even paying your bonds. That's the scary part, guys. You could be a part of a metro district that has $100 million bond on all the infrastructure, blah, blah, blah. Depending on who's in charge, that metro district may be 10 years old and have paid zero back into the original infrastructure. Zero. These metro districts are, I don't know, I'm not going to say they're legal or illegal. All right. That is not my law. But they are there and people don't know about them. It's that HOAs are a big thing here in Colorado, which I had to get used to. And then I had to learn. I lived in Denver and we still have an HOA that we're fighting. But the next,
I learned in that situation, canvassing with Brian Lindstrom when he was running for Ward 6. And I was knocking doors with him directly, and I overheard him having a conversation with a constituent, and they went really deep into this labyrinthian maze of how to navigate, you know, what we want to do with the metro districts and basically how much the city's hands are tied. And when I think about arbitration, Mike, I just want to bring you back in. I'm sorry for interrupting you. I just want you to talk about this. When we talk about arbitration, which way does it usually historically break? You said it is what it is, but what is it?
Mr. Montgomery, arbitration in the theoretical sense is, all right, we're going to go get somebody objective to look at this and make a decision. That is the theoretical. That is what arbitration is for. All right. Reality. The arbitrator does mostly HOA/metro district. Like that. The reason they select that one is that's what they do. And they know what to say, they know how to say it, and they know who to say it to. It should be objective and even. But look, these developers know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They're going out there. They're not here to lose money. They're here to make money. And so they're not going to go to an arbitrator that consistently sides with the homeowner, right? That is not going to be part of the paperwork. That is not going to be in there. They're going to go to an arbitrator that is favorable to them. Period. That's not complicated. Sorry.
And I just wanted to add, there has been some really great investigative reporting done onto metro districts by the Denver Post and David Migoya, who's one of their writers. He's an investigative journalist there. I think he wrote a 3-piece, pretty in-depth, piece on metro districts, how they participate in municipal elections, how they basically stack their own district boards after and during and after they're created, and the amount of debt that some of these districts are in. I forgot what the number was, but it was, I think, in the hundreds of billions in total, if I'm not mistaken. So
if you were a landowner, or no, different. If you are a developer who has a membership on a board in a metro district, there is no reason for you to contemplate repaying back the bonds. Who cares? As a homeowner, you're like, yeah, I want these bonds to be paid off because this is where I live. But as a member of a developer, no. Like I said, the only reason I have any knowledge about this is the same reason I have any knowledge about HOAs. You're getting into fights with them.
Yeah, and I just want to add, to the best of my knowledge, metro districts are a uniquely Coloradan thing in the way that they are utilized here. And a large part of that is because of Tabor. Because, like Paperboy was saying, Aurora doesn't have the extra capital, revenue basically to go out and build new roads, to lay, new pipe for water and sewer out east. These metro districts, part of those bonds, they finance the creation of that, and that gets paid back over time. That is not something that you need to necessarily do in other states. So having metro districts is almost a requirement, especially when you're doing what's considered leapfrog development. Like, you see these folks who build way out east when there's not anything even close around them, right? I'm thinking of some of the developments out on Gun Club Road, for example, where it's just big rural farmsteads basically, and then suddenly a suburban neighborhood. That kind of stuff only becomes possible because of metro districts. And Tabor, has these restrictive formulas that anytime we have an economic downturn, every jurisdiction, unless they've debruced themselves, basically, suffers greatly. So that includes the city of Aurora, which, just so y'all know, we're debruced on sales tax, but not on property tax.
And please, Juan, break down debrucing again. I always ask every time I'm in a school board meeting, someone brings it up. I still don't get it. So anyone in the crowd don't get it, join the club.
You got it. So basically, part of Tabor, there's a lot of, it's several different articles in our Constitution, but we just refer to it all as Tabor, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. That's a very Orwellian name, by the way, because really this is the private sector's Bill of Rights to basically overcharge the public for things that the public sector should be doing. But I digress. What they have, debrucing basically means exempting yourself from the mandatory refunds on property tax, sales tax, and there might be a third one, I can't remember, revenue stream in there. So basically, y'all are familiar with if the state of Colorado gets more revenue than a certain limit, they then have to issue everybody refunds. And at first we're like, oh, that's really exciting, great. Yeah, you get $7 back. But what does that really mean? That means your highways are congested. That means your schools continue to fall apart. That means you don't have, up-to-date education. You don't have supplies, etc. In Aurora, we can keep all the sales tax revenue that we generate. We're exempt on that. But on property tax, we're not. And we are actually in a situation where we may need to give back about $3.5 million, if memory serves, at the end of this year. Because this all ties back together, because we started about how these private equity firms are coming in here, buying things cash, raising property values artificially in a way that hurts our elders and hurts people who are trying to break into the housing market. Well, they're also hurting us on this end too, because now we need this revenue. Y'all know the shape of some of Aurora's roads, right? We don't have a neighborhood repaving program anymore, basically. We'll come do potholes for you, and aside from that, good luck. I mean, this is how it hurts us. We are not able to keep up with the demands of a growing city. The private sector gets to reap all the benefits with very little risk. And at the end of the day, it's all of us who are on the hook for, everything that we're not solving, basically.
It's kind of what Tabor was for, wasn't it? To create the private industry to be the bigger giant than the public.
Yeah, it was very much done with the was it Grover Norquist who said that, you know, he wants to drown government in a bathtub, basically. He wants to shrink it down. And it's intentionally done this way so that your government will, by design, not be able to keep up with what it needs to do, so that the public loses faith in the government and then wants to destroy it. It's part of a, you know, part of the Powell memo, quite frankly. Like, there's this big concerted effort by right-wingers and capitalists, basically, in this country that's been going on since the 1940s, when they talked about maybe trying to, like, you know, overthrow Franklin Roosevelt. Seriously. Yeah, this is kind of like the culmination of a lot of their efforts, where they have unfortunately gotten this cockamamie idea into the Colorado Constitution that we are all suffering under. And
well, hey, Juan, I want to put up this comment from Aaron Futrell at the bottom. If police need separate oversight boards, developers need the same type of independent oversight as a way of accountability and protecting citizens.
I mean, so this is something that we've actually talked to Mike Weissman a bit about. So he's a state representative for HD 36 out of Aurora, and he is an absolute brain on metro districts and special districts, generally speaking, and HOAs as well, because I've had some constituents, you know, been going who reach out to us, you know, asking us for help around with their HOA or metro district, and it's like, our hands are tied, and it's so frustrating. But yes, I agree that metro districts need some kind of oversight. Frankly, I don't think that they ought to be used the way we're using them. You know, I could see an argument for metro districts to be utilized like during economic downturns, when people are very anxious to put up capital for new development, right? As a way to like kind of guarantee that these investments will eventually be repaid. But using them as the default mode for any new kind of development is building an unsustainable city, unfortunately, housing market as well, because these houses are much more expensive than houses that would be built outside of metro districts, which contributes to the housing crisis. Again, circling back to, you know, folks can't afford housing. Well, then the little bit of housing that is affordable is getting gobbled up by private equity and, you know, real estate investment trusts. What do? We're between a rock and a hard place. And that vice is pressing on both sides.
What I was going to throw in there real quick, it hides the real value, or not the value, the true price of a new build.
Yeah.
You look at that 400,000, 300,000, that's not the real price, because you are paying an extra tax that you don't even know about until you start either getting your tax bill or you start wondering why your HOA fees are so high.
Exactly.
See,
and we have
that's what aggravates me, because someone is in the room that was going to be the mayor of Aurora, right? And he wanted to address this entire topic, and he wouldn't have done it with a secret tax. So I want Omar, you know, thanks for hopping on, Omar, you know.
Well, first of all, it's good to see my good friend, Councilmember Marcano. Thank you for all the great work you're doing, and everyone on DBT. You know, one of the things, you know, when we were running and we were out there talking to residents and things of this nature, development is not only coming this year, and we're sort of on the reactive end of dealing with all these different things. But there's another area we can be proactive in, and I want to get your take on. We have a lot of people staying in tents. We have a lot of people that's unhoused, but there's some decent paying jobs with these developments. My question is, what pressure are we putting on the developers to hire within the city of Aurora, especially our unhoused, with a livable wage so that they can live in the city of Aurora? Are we putting pressure on these developers to hire our people that need these jobs?
That's a really great question, Omar. And I think that needed to be asked when we were approving all of these metro districts and when we were looking at the model service plans used to create them. The fact of the matter is, you know, as you all know now, like those districts got approved. And I think they approved, I think the record was like 13 or something like that in one night in like late 20. Yeah, seriously, like Larry, I'm looking at your face. Yeah, they did that before there was a turnover on council, basically, because they know that we wouldn't rubber stamp these things if the council had a different, majority opinion on these. But yeah, so really, as it is now, the ones that are done are done. They're going to do their own thing. A lot of these are going to use, these big home builders are going to come in. They already have like their own labor organization figured out. We can't really get in there, Omar, to the best of my knowledge. Obviously, like, any new developments, that'd be a completely different story. But I actually don't think in the year and 5 months I've been on council so far, we've had a new Metro District application come through for residential.
Is it possible that whether residential or commercial? I mean, you have the developments that's taking place on Colfax in Peoria. Mm-hmm. You got 2 or 3 developments that's about to take place outside the Stanley Marketplace, and you have redevelopment going up on Colfax. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, when people submit their paperwork, and I know you can't hold people hostage, are we making it a priority for them to hire those people that's destitute on Colfax so that they could live with dignity? That's really one of my main concerns when I began to look at development.
Yeah, no, so I can tell you this. Anytime we get approached or, because these developers ask us for meetings, anytime we get approached, those are the first questions that me and several of my colleagues ask. Like, are you paying livable wages? Are you using union labor? What are you going to do to ensure net non-displacement? What are you going to do to ensure that we can actually have our local businesses come into this new development if it's going to require the complete redevelopment of an existing structure as opposed to being a greenfill or brownfill site, right? And to be real, a lot of the times they like to give us like some wishy-washy answers, and then we get into other meetings and then we really push there and then they get the damn message, right? We're kind of in that same process right now. I can't go into details because it's all under executive session, but once those developments come out and you see that some of these things are hopefully different, that'll be the results of those efforts. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I got a question for Juan and Omar. How much power and because I've never been involved with a developer, I wouldn't even know. How much power do these developers have when they come to a city and are like, okay, what exactly can the council or can the city do if a developer's like, all right, well, I want to buy this land. How much is it? What can you do? I'm asking. I don't know.
Yeah. We would only really come into that equation if it's city-owned land and they want to buy publicly owned land, basically. Aside from that, these are private contracts, right? There is, so in other states, I know that you can have more protective policy, but every state has different laws and, a different constitution. And I am not an attorney myself, so I can't really tell you what would or would not be permissible. But what you're discussing is something that I'm currently in discussions with staff. And like I said, some external partners to address housing, but also hopefully commercial development as well.
And just from an outsider, since I unfortunately didn't quite make that threshold of about 215 votes. With that stated, it's also about will. We just saw the city of Boulder put together an equity plan. Why can't we put together an equity plan in Aurora to address some of these issues? There are things that has to be done with will, but in the city of Aurora, you need 6 votes. Mm. And if you can get 6 votes, you can almost move the world.
Yes, you can.
So if we get 6 people who believe in these issues and say, hey, when developers come, here's some things we want to start requiring of them, whether if it's dealing with the environment, if it's dealing with their hiring practices, subcontracting to women and minority-owned businesses. These are things that we can do if the will is there and if people put the pressure on to make it happen.
Yep. And that is, I think, why we stood up the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the city. And that is something that I think is going to be moving forward. That's something that I know City Manager Twombly believes in and knows that is absolutely necessary, and was actually rather frustrated that we didn't already have something like that in place. Just another little anecdote from when we were onboarding and meeting with all of the departments. We actually did discover that there was an office a small business enterprise office that was actually created by councils here, like in the late 2000s or the late aughts, and was never funded. So they passed a resolution basically to create this thing and never put a penny towards it. So that's why we're still having these conversations, Omar, because I've talked to other folks here around these similar things, especially around the contracting. They'll only get subs; they won't ever get prime. And yeah, that's something that I think was an intentional oversight, I guess, because if you actually pass a resolution to do it and then never fund it, that tells me that you never really meant to do anything with it to begin with, right? But that's, again, with the work that City Manager Twombly and the new office, that's all within their scope, and we should be seeing movement there.
And those people are hired by...
I have a question for you. So when it comes to zoning and rezoning process, is there a way that you can actually input in the zoning ordinance, right? Something of, hiring those in that neighborhood or the displaced neighborhood or something in that measure in the zoning ordinance? Yeah,
I think for what I don't know if that would necessarily fall under zoning, but I think for new developments, especially if there's any city dollars or incentives attached, yes, absolutely, yes. That's something that we could do basically to try to ensure that we're hiring local and that the wealth that is being created by these new developments is actually staying in our community, as opposed to, like I said before, like with these REITs and stuff being extracted out elsewhere to who knows where.
And two things, since we've got a school board member on here. As these developers are just headed east, that's got to put a strain and a tax on the school district, because either you build the school, and I know they've built schools out past us because they're headed towards Bennett. Either you build the schools out there, or you have to bus those kids to a school closer to them. How's the school district? Are they consulted? Are they part of that conversation?
I think we might have lost Kevin.
That being said, I got a second. Just regarding, I actually believe in the HOAs. I want to separate those. I'm from Texas, and they're not like they are here, which you can see your pink polka dot house sitting next to the normal house, but it gives people a incentive to it keeps my property value stable. Put simply, I ain't gonna lie. But that being said, there's the school district having to send, getting the students back and forth or building schools, but there are no buses out here. There is no public transportation, and don't ask me how far I got to go to get to a King Soopers or a Safeway. And none of this. I think the last time we looked, I believe Walmart owns the interchange outside of our development. And my understanding is they're just waiting. They're just waiting for the property to go up because they're not going to build another store out here yet. Somebody eventually will. But when you're dealing with these developers, is there any conversation like, okay, well, are you going to have a 7-Eleven, a Walmart, something to take care of the populace?
And yeah, so this would have been, I think, 2017, when the last major annexation the city did was the East Aurora annexation project, right? Which was, if you look at a map of the city of Aurora, there's this part like out east, well beyond Gun Club Road even, that looks like a C. So it included that whole area and then a couple of like parcels north and south. And we were there during testimony, listening to these people out there, and they're like, well, okay, you're going to annex this and then you want to develop it. But what about amenities? Exactly to your point, right? Like, where am I going to go get my grocery? Where am I going to get gas? And they always will say, oh, well, that will come with the rooftops. But it doesn't. I used to do store design for King Soopers, and I talked to, when I was over in Cincinnati, because King Soopers is Kroger. When I was in Cincinnati, I was talking to some of their staff, and I asked them, like, what do y'all, because this is around the same time, what do y'all typically look for in order to build a new store? And they said it's just about rooftops, but not 400 rooftops, like one of these, metrics I have. They're talking thousands of rooftops. So if you don't have that population, they're not going to build a new store out there. even if it is 15 miles away from the nearest King Soopers, like we have, like I think in Northeast Aurora, that's still a problem. They don't care about the inconvenience or the access to amenities. They're looking about, am I going to be able to make money off of this store? Right? That's in their best interest. So this is an area where the best interest of the developers are actually kind of opposed to the best interest of the service providers, right? And they're at odds here. And yeah, frankly, we can ask these questions, and the council at the time did, but you can't force this to happen, right? Like what we'd be able to do, I don't know, like I know there are cooperative grocery stores that exist. Their communities set up their own, basically pull together resources and set up a co-op, but that's also probably not something that you know, neighborhood's going to want to necessarily do, right? This is typically like, this occurs like in much more dense, higher population cities where like there's a better community bond as opposed to these newer developments out there. So it's a real problem. I agree with you. We can't, again, force the private sector to do that, unfortunately. So,
and talking about those progressive values, when it comes to bringing these businesses in, how good is Costco? Because, you know, everyone's like, well, you know, when you really want to talk about it, Sam's, you know, is Walmart, is the devil, you know. How good is Costco?
I mean, that's a interesting question. I mean, you know, they pay above the average for that kind of a business, right? But, you know, when we're talking about equity in businesses, to me, that means that someone's going to be a co-owner, or at the very least, they're going to have like an ESOP program. I don't know if I've never worked for Costco, so I'm not sure if they have that. But when we're talking about, you know, building equitable business environment in Aurora, I'm thinking of worker-owned businesses, like cooperative businesses, or like I said, at the very least, ESOPs. You know what I'm saying? So if we're not doing that, then it's just words are wind. You're not actually making a difference. Just because someone pays you a slightly higher wage than another business doesn't mean that's going to change your life. It'll help you out, right? But you're not really in control of your destiny there. You're not an owner. And that's one of the things I would like to see us foster. And I'm hoping that if things go well this November, we'll be able to really change that culture here and get a, you know, I want to see Aurora become basically a hub for cooperative businesses, for people owning the places where they work.
I would love to see the city of Aurora become an equity serving city, to make it just part of every single department where equity is at the forefront of everything. And speaking of DEI and equity and things of this nature, I hear there was a DEI training with the police department. And within that DEI training in the police department, that there were some officers who were offended at the fact that the trainer, Dr. Nita Mosley, who is nationally known for doing DEI work, was offended because she started talking about the history of law enforcement. And within the history of law enforcement, where slave patrols were a part of law enforcement history.
Yep.
Although we're hiring a DEI person for the city of Aurora, that doesn't mean mindsets have changed. What are we doing to change mindsets? I think that's critical for the city of Aurora, as diverse as the city is. What are your thoughts about that?
I absolutely agree with everything you just said, Omar. My personal opinion is that if, frankly, the people who are sitting here complaining, saying this is reverse racism, like, one, that's not a thing. And two, they probably shouldn't be in this role. In fact, they definitely should not be in this role. Council doesn't have oversight over that, as you all know, but that is my opinion. And part of this, honestly, it's like, how do you change the nature of someone? How do you change their hearts and minds? And God, if we had the answer to that question, I think we'd live in a much better world. But, you know, so where I personally sit on this is, if these folks are so recalcitrant, so set in their ways, or when confronted with new information or a different perspective, or, you know, that might not even be remotely familiar to them, and their reaction is to lash out and attack the chief and attack Dr. Tyler and attack everyone else around them, basically, because they feel personally attacked because someone acknowledged the history of the institution of policing in our country, they shouldn't be on the force. And that, I think that just goes to show you the gravity of the situation, and which is why, again, I've said this before, I'll say it again, like, I think the problem is the institution. We're dealing with systemic problems that stem from the history of this country. We grew up in this environment, we were educated in this system, we've normalized it all, right? but it is not just. It does not produce good outcomes. And we need to continue to reimagine, rework, reform, abolish, however you want to frame it, make meaningful changes to this so that we actually have a just society and that we don't need to be so reactionary and reactive in our approaches, right? Because like I've said this about policing, it's a difficult job. I would not personally do it. They only ever see people when they are at their worst. But part of the problem, and this was, I think, the former chief of police in Dallas said this, is that we as a society have decided that it is the police's responsibility to deal with the externalities of every single way we can fail people. And that is unfair. That is a Sisyphean task, and that is also destructive. So that's why I have the politics I have. That is why I fight for affordable housing, for social housing, actually. I would love to see a society where we decommodify housing, or at the very least have a public option for housing that is dignified and, beautiful, like what Amsterdam, I'm sorry, not Amsterdam, good Lord, I'm getting off on a tangent here. I need to calm down a little bit. But what Vienna, Austria has done, their social housing model is 100 years plus old. It was done when in an era called Red Vienna. And it's called Red Vienna because their city council was run by socialists. And they created this housing program that has withstood the test of time. It is mixed income. It has all of these amenities that we were talking about, like, well, you're building new housing. Where's the school? Where's the grocery store? That's part of the master plan because the city is the developer for their housing. As opposed to letting the private sector, who might not always have the same goal, do that. The city says, well, you know what? We're going to take care of some of these things. 65% of their housing stock is publicly owned. Just throwing that out there. Like, this isn't like pie in the sky stuff. This is another city in the world who has done this and done it well.
But everybody that runs for office says they want the voice of the people. And then when you say, I want to put the voice of the people in how we're housed and how we police the community, that's when everybody gets their feathers in a ruffle. It's hypocritical thinking. Someone put that in the comments earlier. There's a lot of hypocrisy going on. Yeah, Aaron Futrell said, and Aaron on a roll. Aurora saying you belong here. Their campaign saying you belong here is hypocritical when they're so defensive over a new way. And like you said, like these some of these ideas are over 100 years old. So when I bring you a new idea, don't get all offended, especially when you're willing to tell me that what we're doing right now doesn't work.
Not like another thing that I just want to bring up, because we're talking about kind of like big picture systemic things here, right? Like, when people often point at like the Nordic model, right? The Nordic countries, right? Like, look, they have a much higher quality of life and stuff. They do this kind of stuff. They have social housing. They have, in some cases, they don't even have minimum wages, but their effective wage floor is like the equivalent of like $19 an hour here. And you know how they do that? They have sectoral unionism. So many people belong to a union that the unions effectively control the wages in the country. And like, you can do that way, or you can do it through passing local ordinances to set a higher wage floor, right? The end result is the same. You have to be real. Like, what do people need to exist? And not just exist, but to thrive.
Yes.
That's what we should be looking at, right? What do people need to thrive? And through innovative mechanisms, they've managed to do that over there. And when people poo-poo that stuff here, anytime someone comes up with an idea like that, or let's do social housing, let's raise the minimum wage, or let's, bolster unionism, it's like, I hear so much rhetoric about American exceptionalism from people on the right, but they are the biggest downers on America, if you ask me, because they're always telling us how this is impossible. Pie in the sky will never happen. You can't do that. They don't deserve it. Like, why? How does these two? You can't square that circle. You know what I'm saying? Like, So.
And to add on to that,
go ahead, Larry.
Oh, my apologies. I didn't mean to cut you off, boss man. The Nordic area, right? The reason why it works so well. Let's look at their minority population. They make up like 0.6% of their whole entire population. So it's a whole different type of ideological construct going on with them when you bring it to a place that's more diverse, right? It's easier for me to be like, let me set this up in the Nordic area, such as Norway or Denmark or Finland, and you got 98% of your country white, right? So it makes it so much easier in a more diverse area. That's why I feel like And that's an argument I see that happens, right, is over there. And the reason why they try to say it won't work without saying it, right? Because a lot of times people be like, I don't want to help the minority in that way.
Yeah.
I don't want to unionize because they give more power to minorities.
What they're saying is we're too racist to live in a civilized society. I mean, come on. Like, that's absolutely asinine.
They're also saying inherently, we can't actually do it with you people because there's something wrong with you guys.
Yeah.
When it's all white, they can get it accomplished. But is it culture? Is it genetic? I don't know. That's what listen to these long.
Some of these folks are like one step removed from whipping out the calipers. I'm telling you, like, this stuff is getting ugly with the current state of the right wing here in this country. So, yeah.
Juan, I just wanted to dive into. I know I keep pivoting to different issues, so y'all have to forgive me because we only got you for a short time.
I'm willing to come back.
We also can't ignore the fact that gun violence and crime is going up in all major metropolitans, especially in the city of Aurora. There's a lot of. It seems like every other day I'm probably getting an email from someone saying we're about to have some type of vigil for someone that has been murdered or someone that has been hurt. From a city council perspective, we're about to come up on summer. We know summer are the hot months. What plans do we have for our youth? And what plans do we have that's not extremely punitive to address the crime in the city of Aurora?
Great questions, Omar. So with regards to the youth, I think if y'all don't know, we stood up a youth violence prevention program with about $750,000 of marijuana money. So it's a whole new department in the city. And part of that, so that was Councilmember Lawson's brainchild. And then I tagged on to that, bringing forward something that Candace Bailey and Claudine McDonald had already been doing in the city. So they had basically these safe zones, to provide great activities for our Aurora's youth after hours, and to hopefully like get folks drawn to those things as opposed to the other things that are occurring in our city. And I did a lot of research into those kind of like keep the lights on programs, and they work really well when they are community led, but city or government sponsored basically. So we provide the resources and we let the community do what they think is best. And that's the approach that we're piloting with another $250,000, give or take, of city of marijuana money. So that's something that's going to be kicking off. In terms of the new department, I want to say the positions have all been posted, and I think the director is pretty close to being selected. And once that director is selected, they're not just I think it's maybe I'm getting my departments mixed here. There's been a lot of change, sorry. But they're going to be overseeing the Keep the Lights On program, but they're also going to be, and youth violence generally speaking, but they're also going to be responsible for standing up our Kahoot style program as well. And that I think ties into the second part of your question. Because earlier rant was that police are basically in our society responsible for everything that goes wrong in society, and the Kahoots program, and let me back up a little bit. So Kahoots actually stands for Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets, and this is a program that was born out of Eugene, Oregon, and their White Bird Clinic out there. And Denver has replicated very successfully with the STAR program that Vinny Cervantes and Dasher helped stand up. And we're actually working with them to do the same thing here in Aurora. So I'm very confident that this is going to make a major change and get much better outcomes, frankly, from a lot of different kinds of calls in the city. It's going to free up police resources to take care of the stuff that they actually ought to be taking care of. And I think it's going to be a win-win-win for the institution, for results, and for our more vulnerable parts of our community, and for the public as a whole, especially from a budgetary standpoint. So.
Juan, there was an event that I helped Claudine. Claudine's done a lot of good work with the city. I helped her with an event, the Aurora Youth Expo. right when Chief Metz resigned or retired or however that worked out. He was warning us it's going to be a hot summer, and I helped him get in touch with about 6 or 7 different unions, and they basically had like a UTV that was like signing up for free memberships to the rec centers. It was like a job fair / career fair, and there were tons of booths from like local businesses. And like people, I don't know if there was like a blood drive or something. There was a lot of stuff going on. I saw a little karate booth. I saw all kinds of stuff going on over there. For real, like it was so much going on. I was reffing for a basketball tournament at the same time. I can't play basketball no more, but there was so much stuff going on, and I feel like that needs to be a standing event. And the career fair portion of it needs to be standing. That relationship with the unions for jobs with dignity needs to be a standing relationship and investment. Talking about IBEW, your Aurora Plumbers Union, and whatnot. I'm twisting the arm on the school board, trying to bring them into the school district because it's free. Talk to them and have this career pathway for these kids. You're not going to spend any money on it. They're chomping at the bit to get in there. We just got to open the doors, let them in. I just wanted to voice that to you. Get with Claudine about that again. Of course, I need to get with her. I was traveling for the last task force meeting. I was supposed to see her personally, but get with her about that. And what do you feel about unionization? You brought that up earlier in the possibility of making Aurora a much better workplace with dignity.
Oh, I'd love us to become a union town. And I think, Kevin, what we were talking about here with bringing our unions into our schools and letting kids know that there's another option than just getting into extreme debt for, pursuing higher education or making do without any kind of formal education, because honestly, like some of the best paying jobs I can think of off the top of my head right now are skilled trades. You can, become an electrician and be making a very handsome salary after just a few years. I mean, and that when, I think about that, it's not just an alternative to higher education, but it's actually something that I think would give people a lot of hope. And when we are bringing that into schools, when kids are young and like letting them know that, this is another option for them, I think that also will help kind of combat a lot of the, I guess we'll say like negative influences, negative environment that I think lead people down some of these bad paths. You know what I'm saying? So.
Well, you brought up the Scandinavian model, right? You too, Larry. I'm gonna let you jump in, but y'all brought the Scandinavian model, and what we're talking about is basically the bottom floor of it, because in Scandinavia they're using apprenticeships for high tech industry jobs as well. They have apprenticeships for programmer. Yeah, my bad, Larry. Go ahead and jump in. We're gonna wrap it up here in just a second, but go ahead, man.
Oh no, man! I was ad-libbing over here, but I was just gonna ask about connecting, like how a lot of people out there have their institutions, right, such as nonprofits, things ready to help out the city in those manners. How do they get connected with the city of how being assistance with the youth violence prevention, right? How do they get connected with those programs and put their programs to it to see? Because like you were saying, the community knows. Right.
Yes.
And those people in the community have those programs running. So how do they connect with that?
Yeah. So I've already had a couple of local churches like Mountain View here in Ward 4. And there was another larger faith organization that reached out to us, and actually APS reached out to us as well, Kevin. I forgot the person's name, but we do have a contact there. And we've got their information. Once we get the program actually stood up after we make these hires, they're going to be contacted. And what will happen then is that they'll let us know that this is the conduit for other community members who want to help out with these efforts. And we'll just get y'all, we'll be the middle people, we'll get y'all in touch and y'all can work together in the way that's best for our community. That'll be how that works out. And I wanted to, I saw Aaron Futrell's comment about AGRIP. That is part of what is included in the effort that we're discussing here, Aaron. That's Councilmember Lawson was a big fan of AGRIP, knows that it was very successful, and that's part of what this new department is going to be responsible for, making a permanent fixture in the city.
I like that comment Brian Lindstrom put up there. So Brian running a resolution at CEA this year to ensure trade unions will be in our schools. And hey, look, it starts at the district too. CEA can't twist our arm. We're APS. If the board has political will, brought it up at the last meeting. I'm gonna bring it up at the rest of the next meetings until it happens. And basically, I just need to keep on doing my homework, and I need to put it on the agenda. Now, I was working with Josh Downey before, but he's moved on, and I don't know who the new president of Doubt is. I'm going to be reaching out and trying to put something together more formal to bring proposals into the school district. So, you know, because look, man, we're working on it.
Hey, Juan, one last question from me. Sorry for the space I'm taking up. When we talk about child labor laws, you know, a child needs a work permit at the age of 15. Mm-hmm. Many of the youth that really don't have a lot to do during the summer are between the age of 13 and 16. Is there something that can be done in the municipal code, although you have your federal child labor laws and your state child labor laws, to where maybe we can get some of those 13-year-olds and up working or receiving stipends for 20 hours worth of work, learning some of those trades that we're short in? I think 15 is a little, it's there, but we got 13 and 14-year-olds who can start learning their careers early. What are your thoughts about?
So, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I think it was me.
Okay.
My dog is having an issue right now.
Okay, cool. All right. I thought like my internet died or something. So that's a really interesting question, Omar. And I didn't grow up here, but you know, I grew up down in Houston. And we had, through Pasadena Independent Schools, a cooperative, or sorry, not cooperative, but a co-op program where I think when you were in your junior year, so 14 and 15, you were able to basically, through your school district, get 20 hours a week of employment like you're describing, start getting a paycheck, but also get some practical experience. And I did that. I started working at GameStop. So I had two, it was like 3 days a week where I left early basically, and I went to work at GameStop. And I think that that's something that we might look into here. You know, when you say child, when you frame it as child labor, just so you know, like that gives me an initial like, whoa, hold up, no. But no, like if we're talking like a co-op program like that, where it's like you can opt into it, get educational credit for it, make a paycheck, build a paid internship. I think that's a much better way to put it.
Call it that.
Yeah, I don't like unpaid internships either, but yeah, paid internships. That's a much better way to frame that. And yeah, that's something that I think I'll discuss that with staff. Let me add that to my list here. We might need to follow up with Kevin on that too. We'll see.
Hey, follow up with Marcus too. Marcus doing a whole lot of stuff that I can't get involved in with the school board as well. I can only lift so much weight. Marcus is out there doing a lot. But look, with all that being said, let's wrap it up. Anybody got a dope black thought for us to go out on?
No, it's Juan. You know the rules.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So. So y'all know I'm a democratic socialist, and I came to this not through a lot of reading. I never picked up, a lot of theory to come through, but it was through figures, including figures like Fred Hampton, that actually brought me to this. So I'll leave you with a Fred Hampton quote here as my dope black thought, and that is that we don't think you fight fire with fire best. We think you fight fire with water best. We're going to fight racism, not with racism, but we're going to fight racism with solidarity. And we say we're not going to fight capitalism with black capitalism, but we're going to fight it with socialism. And with that, solidarity forever. So
and you got a black power fist from everybody. Hey, with that, everybody, we're going to log out of the live show, and I appreciate y'all. Want to stay on with us real quick.
All right. Sounds good.
DBT out.
What is love? It's a drug. Let it rotate, to get back in it. Calling me an Uber just to get back in it. Use the cash out like pay, I spend it. Is it really worth the wait? I don't get it. Divide and gravitate. Taste that wet emoji got me higher out of space.